Henry Caldwell, a billionaire whose empire stretched across skyscrapers and oil fields, sat motionless in a leather chair that gleamed under the warm glow of his office lamps. To anyone passing by, he looked asleep, his head tilted back. Breath slow, hands resting on the armrests. But Henry was wide awake. His half-open eyes were fixed on one thing: the massive steel safe deliberately left wide open beside his desk. Inside lay stacks of $100 bills, neat towers of green that represented more than most families would earn in a lifetime. This wasn't carelessness. It was a trap. At 45, Henry had built his fortune with grit and iron will. Yet a recent betrayal had gutted his trust. His own business partner had stolen $3 million, leaving Henry questioning whether honesty even existed anymore. That night, he decided to find out for himself. Could anyone resist temptation when wealth sat openly within reach? Or would they, like so many before, prove that greed was stronger than principle? The test was simple. Henry would appear to sleep the vault exposed and wait for someone to enter. His jaw tightened as he listened for footsteps in the hallway. Soon, the quiet creak of the door announced their arrival. In walked a cleaning woman named Clara Johnson, followed by her 6-year-old daughter, Lily. Clara carried her bucket and cloths with practiced rhythm, unaware of the stage Henry had set. Little Lily, wearing pink gloves her mother had bought to make her feel helpful, spotted the safe almost immediately. Her small eyes widened at the sight of more money than she had ever dreamed of. Henry held his breath. What the child did next would either deepen his despair or change his life forever. Lily tiptoed closer, her tiny pink gloves catching the golden shimmer of the desk lamp. Henry's heartbeat drummed louder in his chest as he prepared for the worst. She paused in front of the open safe, her gaze sparkling like she had just stumbled into a fairy tale. The child reached out, but not to grab the cash. Instead, she frowned at the chaotic piles of bills, scattered and uneven. Carefully, with the patience only a 6-year-old could muster, Lily began stacking the money into neat piles. She separated the denominations, aligning every corner as though it were a puzzle only she could solve. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice light as a feather, "Mr. Caldwell's money is all messy. I fixed it just like you taught me with our coins at home." Across the room, Clara Johnson turned abruptly, startled to see her daughter so close to the fortune. Her face drained of color. "Lily, you mustn't touch the boss's things," she said sharply, her hands trembling as she set down her rag. "But it was messy, Mama," Lily replied innocently, looking back at her stacks of perfectly ordered cash. "Won't he be happy when he wakes up and sees it tidy?" Henry's throat tightened, his eyes stinging with something he hadn't felt in years. Here was a little girl who had probably never held more than $20 in her hands, standing before a fortune, and she had not pocketed a single bill. Instead, she had treated his money with the reverence of something sacred, her only motive being to make it neat, to make it right. The billionaire leaned slightly in his chair, almost forgetting to keep up the illusion of sleep. His heart ached as he realized he was witnessing not temptation, but a pure lesson in honesty. And though Lily could not have known it, her small act of integrity had just set in motion a chain of events that would turn Henry Caldwell's world upside down. In the nights that followed, Henry Caldwell found himself quietly observing Clara Johnson and her little girl. He kept his distance, careful not to betray that he had been awake during the test. But the memory of Lily's small hands arranging stacks of cash lingered in his mind, like a song he couldn't forget. Through the buildings, surveillance, and subtle inquiries, Henry discovered truths that both humbled and unsettled him. Clara wasn't just working at his company's offices overnight. She also scrubbed floors in a doctor's clinic each morning. She slept barely 4 hours a day, yet never once complained. Lily was always at her side doing homework in the waiting room, coloring quietly in a corner, or lending a hand with childlike eagerness. What impressed Henry most wasn't Clara's endurance, but the way she spoke to her daughter. One night, as Clara dusted the bookshelves, Henry overheard her gentle voice carry through the hallway. "We always return what isn't ours, even if no one is watching. Our honesty is worth more than any money in the world." Lily listened with wide eyes, nodding earnestly, as if each word were a commandment carved in stone. Henry felt his chest tighten. This was no ordinary mother. Clara had grown up in foster care, abandoned by circumstance, and had fought her way through life without the privilege of higher education or support. At 22, she became a single mother when Lily's father walked away, and she refused to accept welfare or handouts. She built her dignity with calloused hands and late-night shifts. Henry, who had seen greed infect boardrooms and betrayal steal millions, suddenly realized he was witnessing something rare integrity passed from one generation to the next, not in speeches but in small daily acts. And though Clara had no idea her quiet lessons were about to change far more than her daughter's future, they were about to alter the course of Henry Caldwell's empire. Henry Caldwell's newfound respect for Clara and Lily might have remained a quiet revelation, had it not been for Richard Whitmore. Richard, the company's vice president and son of one of its original founders, carried himself with the smug assurance of a man born into privilege. At 50, his influence lingered not because of brilliance, but because of inheritance. During a finance review, Richard's hawk-like eyes noticed the quiet salary adjustment Henry had ordered for Clara. He leaned back in his chair, lips curling into a sneer. "Tell me, Henry, why are we wasting extra money on cleaning staff, especially on that particular one?" Henry kept his voice even. "Clara Johnson is an exceptional employee." Richard chuckled, the sound dry and cruel. "Exceptional. She scrubs floors. Don't fool yourself. Give these people an extra coin and they'll soon be demanding the whole vault. It's in their nature." A ripple of fury passed through Henry, but he forced himself to stay composed. Richard's prejudice was nothing new, but this time his words cut deeper. He wasn't just belittling an employee. He was insulting the very honesty Henry had just witnessed with his own eyes. That evening, Henry's anger turned to quiet fire when he saw Richard corner Clara in the hallway. Henry remained unseen in the shadows as Richard's voice dropped into a threatening hiss. "I know you're getting more than you deserve. I don't care what kind of favors you're doing, but it ends now. And get that child out of here. This isn't a daycare." Lily clutched her mother's hand, her wide eyes filled with fear. Clara drew herself tall, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Sir, I'm just doing my job." Richard leaned closer, his words venomous. "Your job is to clean and stay invisible, nothing more." From his hidden vantage point, Henry felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just anger. It was the righteous rage of a man who knew a line had been crossed, and this time he would not remain silent. Henry Caldwell returned to his office that night with a storm in his chest. The image of Richard Whitmore towering over Clara and frightening little Lily replayed in his mind like a scene carved in fire. Enough was enough. Henry had spent years overlooking Richard's arrogance for the sake of corporate stability, but watching that man's cruelty spill over onto an innocent child was the breaking point. From behind his desk, Henry opened the company's security system, the same network Richard himself had once championed as a way to monitor productivity. What Richard didn't know was that every toxic word, every sneer, every fabricated accusation he hurled at Clara had been captured in crystal clarity. But Henry wasn't content with recordings alone. He wanted Richard to collapse under the weight of his own venom, publicly, undeniably. For that he needed more than technology. He needed someone who understood how men like Richard operated in the shadows. With steady hands, Henry dialed a number he hadn't called in years. "Marcus, it's Caldwell," he said into the receiver. "I need your services again." On the other end, Marcus Chen, former FBI investigator and now corporate sleuth, let out a low chuckle. "What kind of trouble this time?" "The kind that reeks of racism and abuse of power," Henry replied. "I need evidence, solid evidence, the kind even Richard can't wriggle away from." "Richard Whitmore," Marcus said, almost amused. "That spoiled heir will be easier to corner than a rat in a cage. Men like him always leave trails." Henry leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. "Then follow every trail. Phone calls, emails, old lawsuits, whatever dirt you find, I want it all. I don't just want him removed from this company. I want him exposed for what he truly is." As the call ended, Henry's reflection stared back at him from the darkened office window. For years he had been a man of numbers, contracts, and caution. Tonight he became something else, a man determined to protect decency at any cost. And Richard Whitmore had no idea the trap was already closing in. By midweek, Henry Caldwell's plan began to take shape, though Richard Whitmore believed he was the one in control. The vice president strutted through the building with smug confidence, convinced that his scheme to destroy Clara Johnson would finally rid him of what he saw as a nuisance. That evening, Henry watched from the security hub on the top floor as Richard crept into the janitorial supply room. On the screen, the man's polished shoes gleamed under the fluorescent lights. In his hand was a small velvet box. He opened it with a flourish, revealing a gleaming Rolex watch worth more than most workers made in a year. Richard glanced around nervously, then tucked the watch into Clara's cleaning cart. Henry's stomach churned, but he remained silent, his face lit only by the glow of the monitors. He didn't just have one angle, he had three. Marcus Chen's team had installed extra cameras earlier that week, hidden in corners Richard didn't even know existed. Every second of his little performance was captured in high definition. Downstairs, Clara arrived for her night shift, Lily skipping at her side with her school books tucked under her arm. To Clara, it was just another evening of hard work. To Richard, it was the perfect stage for humiliation. He descended with 2 security guards in tow, his voice dripping with false politeness. "Mrs. Johnson, I need to inspect your supplies," he announced. Moments later, he pulled the Rolex from her cart, raising it high like a hunter displaying his kill. "Ah, how curious. This watch went missing from Mr. Caldwell's office just yesterday." Clara's face drained of color. Lily's frightened eyes darted from her mother to the looming men. "I've never seen that in my life," Clara whispered. Richard smirked. "Of course not. Thieves never do." Just as one guard reached for his phone to call the police, the office door swung open. Henry Caldwell stepped inside, Marcus Chen, and 3 journalists at his side. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of thunder. "Funny, Richard. That's not my watch, and we caught you planting it 40 minutes ago." Richard Whitmore's smirk faltered the moment Henry Caldwell spoke. The journalists raised their cameras' flashes, cutting through the office like lightning strikes. Marcus Chen stepped forward, holding up a tablet that displayed clear footage Richard slipping the Rolex into Clara's cart, checking the hallway to make sure no one saw him. "Angle 1, Marcus said, swiping to the next clip. "Angle 2. And just in case you thought we missed it, Angle 3. Your face couldn't be clearer, Richard." The color drained from Richard's cheeks as the evidence looped on screen. He opened his mouth to protest, but Henry's voice cut through the air sharp as glass. "Oh, but that's not all. Marcus, show him the rest." The investigator tapped again, projecting screenshots of Richard's private post, sugly hateful remarks about black employees and Latino staff. Phrases no one could excuse, vile words that now filled the room with a heavy silence. Clara gasped, her hand covering her mouth, as Lily clung to her side. Richard stumbled backward, sweat beading on his forehead. "This is an invasion of privacy. You can't." You mean the surveillance system you approved yourself? Henry interrupted coldly. It captured your threats in the parking lot, your fabricated violations in HR, even your call to Daddy asking him to frame an innocent woman. You signed off on the cameras, Richard. You just never imagined they'd be turned on you. One of the journalists, her voice steady and merciless, stepped forward. Jennifer Walsh, Channel 7, News. Mr. Whitmore, do you have any comment on these recordings that show systematic racial discrimination and conspiracy to frame your subordinate? Richard's lips quivered, but no words came. At that moment, the police arrived, their presence sealing his downfall. Detective Harris stepped inside and recited the charges: conspiracy to fabricate evidence, harassment, racial discrimination, and attempted defamation. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Richard's eyes darted desperately toward Henry. We can settle this. My family still has influence. Henry didn't flinch. Not anymore. The board voted 20 minutes ago to buy out every last share your family owned. You've lost it all. Lily's small voice broke the silence. Mr. Henry, will the bad man stop scaring Mommy now? Henry knelt to her level, his eyes softening. Yes, sweetheart. Hell never hurt you again. The echoes of Richard Whitmore's downfall lingered long after the police led him away in handcuffs. For Clara Johnson, however, life was about to change in ways she had never dared to imagine. 6 months later, she no longer walked the polished halls of Caldwell Enterprises with a mop and bucket. Instead, she carried a leather portfolio, her heels clicking against marble floors, with a confidence born not of privilege, but of perseverance. Henry Caldwell had appointed her as the company's new director of human resources, a position he created after learning she had once studied business before life forced her to set aside her dreams. On her very first day in the role, Clara announced a scholarship program for employees, children, a program named the Fair Chance Initiative. The very first recipient was Lily, now 7, who beamed with pride as she ran through the office, clutching her new school books and sketches she wanted to show Mr. Henry. The transformation rippled far beyond one family. Under Clara's guidance, Caldwell Enterprises became a national model for diversity and inclusion. The company, once known only for its financial empire, now earned headlines for its culture of fairness. Awards arrived, media outlets praised its bold reforms, and families who once felt invisible suddenly had a seat at the table. Meanwhile, Richard's story unfolded in stark contrast. After 18 months behind bars, he emerged to find his fortune gone, his reputation ruined. No reputable firm would hire him. His wife divorced him, his children dropped his name, and the man who once wielded power with arrogance was reduced to selling used cars, earning less in a year than Clara now made in a month. One evening, as Clara reviewed applications for the scholarship fund, Lily leaned against her shoulder, whispering, "Mommy, one day, I want to be a lawyer, so I can help people like Mr. Henry helped us." Clara smiled through quiet tears. What had begun as a test of honesty in a silent office had become a legacy of justice, proving that integrity, once protected, can transform not just lives, but generations. 3 years later, the Caldwell Tower bustled with a new kind of energy. In the lobby, portraits of scholarship students lined the wall faces of young men and women who had been given opportunities once out of reach. Among them was Lily Johnson, now 10, who proudly announced at her birthday party that she was bound for Harvard one day. Clara, her mother, had completed her MBA and was now recognized nationwide for reshaping corporate human resources with dignity and fairness. At a gala honoring Caldwell Enterprises for its contributions to racial equality, Henry stood at the podium, his voice steadier than ever. "I once doubted if true honesty existed in this world," he told the crowd. "But the small hands of a 6-year-old reminded me that integrity isn't just alive, it's powerful enough to change everything." Richard Whitmore tried to tear us down, but he ended up lifting us to heights we never dreamed possible. The audience rose in applause, not just for Henry, but for Clara and Lily's mother and daughter, who had unknowingly reshaped an empire with their decency. Across town, Richard lived alone in a shabby apartment, his name forever stained by the truth he could never escape. True justice isn't measured by punishing the corrupt, but by protecting and uplifting those who act with integrity. A single honest act, even from a child, can spark a transformation that ripples across generations. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever witnessed an act of honesty that changed everything? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because more stories of courage, justice, and hope are on the way.